Hello everyone, afternoon, early evening, it's like 5 something here in New York. This is Gene from NYC and I'm back with another video. As you can see, I'm taking it old school. I'm taking it Genesis. I'm taking it back to the early 1990s in my childhood. So I wanted to do a different type of video today. I do videos where I grouse and rant and complain, and those are fun. But I also want to do a video that was positive, especially since of all the criticism of Mortal Kombat, and do something that was a bit different, right? Positive about a game that perhaps not too many people are familiar with, but it's still somewhat connected to Mortal Kombat, or at least to the type of fighting game craze the original 2 games created back in the early and mid 1990s. So before I get started, I just want to welcome my newest subscribers. My subscriber count continues to steadily grow. That certainly makes me happy. I believe one of my subscribers is a Dinker27. I hope I got your name right. So thank you. Welcome to the channel. I hope you continue to enjoy the content. And to everybody else, again, please don't feel bad. YouTube probably did not give me your name, but you're certainly all welcome. So I wanted to cover Eternal Champions today, as you can obviously see with how the camera's been focused on those 2 words all this time. I mentioned in my rant about Danish Syed of NetherRealm Studios that I go back to the old school and that I have games like Eternal Champions. Now, this was a game that I would say was a bit of an MK ripoff, right? Once Mortal Kombat hit it big, right, they became the game to emulate, just as Street Fighter previously had been the game to emulate. So this game has a lot of similar elements to Mortal Kombat, both positively and negatively, right? It had fatalities, it has stage fatalities, which I believe were called Cinekills. Right, they had an interesting cast of characters. You see some of them here. I believe that's Jonathan Blade. No, that's not Wesley Snipes, but yes, the character's name is Blade, and he does look a lot like the way Wesley Snipes would in the Blade film, but that film I think came about 5 or 6 years later. This game I believe is around 92 to like 94. I'm thinking 1993 to be honest, but that's just me. You have a sort of, prehistoric man here. I believe this nice lady in the back is Jetta Max, who was the acrobat in the game. That might be the Warlock character, I really can't tell. But this was one of those Mortal Kombat copycat games that actually, I think in some ways did it right. This game was one of those games where it wasn't quite as successful as Mortal Kombat, but it also was not as bad as other games that followed in MK's footsteps, such as Bloodstorm or the infamous Tattoo Assassins. I've seen playthroughs of Tattoo Assassins. That game is awful. That game is insulting to me, honestly, because Tattoo Assassins is what people who don't like Mortal Kombat and games like it boiled down MK2. Tattoo Assassins is what people who don't like Mortal Kombat think Mortal Kombat is, and that's why it's appealing, right? And it's like, no, that is actually, I'm not gonna say that the sex and the violence in Mortal Kombat is not appealing, but there's more to Mortal Kombat than that. It wouldn't have lasted as long as it has, even with the woke MK11, if it did not have more to offer than just sex and violence. But games like Tattoo Assassins are pretty much the boiled down, distilled version of what, again, people who don't like Mortal Kombat think Mortal Kombat is. Fortunately, this game, at least to me, was not like that. It actually had a very interesting premise. One of the things I always thought that this game did well was its story. So its story is interesting. So the idea is that you have 9 warriors, right, at different stages in time. For example, this guy's from the future. He's from the prehistoric past. I believe she's from the Boxer Rebellion, so probably somewhere in the 1800s. You have the Warlock, who was probably from the 1600s. I believe he was killed during the Salem witch trials. But basically, you have all these characters from these different lands and from these different points in time who have one thing in common. They all died before their time. And they were all meant to change the world in some way. And so, they come together in this space, this plane outside of space and time. And they basically come together to basically engage in Mortal Kombat. Again, I never said this game made any sense. I just said it had a cool story. This is the 1990s. Edgy is everything. But basically, they come together in this space, in this sort of realm outside of time and space to fight each other, basically for the chance at rebirth. Right, so each character has an individual stage, which is a reflection of the time period that they come from, and both usually is a reflection of the time period and the part of the world they come from, and sometimes references their death. Like, for example, Xavier, who is the Warlock, the Alchemist, was burnt at the stake, so his stage, naturally features a stake. Right, and it looks like it comes from like 1600s colonial America because he was killed during the Salem witch trials. Right, you have Shadow, for example. Her stage, I think, is like on top of a building in what is supposed to be the modern day, again, 1993. Right, and so she's fighting her opponent like at the top of a building because she was thrown off a building. That's how she died. So the stages are sort of a reference to the character and to their death and to the time period and place where they come from, usually. One of the coolest stages I always thought was actually Larson's stage. Larson's like this 1920s cat burglar from Chicago, and his stage is in front of like an old school 1920s, what's I'm looking for? Movie theater. So it's interesting. Right, it had very colorful stages. That's one of the things I really liked about it. I mean, MK's color palette, which fit for today, right? But MK's Mortal Kombat's color palette, especially Mortal Kombat 2 on, right, was very dark, very muddy, which again worked for that game. But something that I did appreciate about Eternal Champions is that it's actually very bright and very colorful. So that was one of the things. It had a different art style and aesthetic and visual appeal, and I appreciated that. It also had interesting controls, which was also its problem, and what made it different. Right, the issue with the controls is that it was, at least for me, it was always hard as hell to pull off special moves. Right, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So anyway, as I was saying, you have these 9 warriors coming back to life, engaging in Mortal Kombat, fighting each other, finally for a chance to face the Eternal Champion. Right, it's not really quite said what the Eternal Champion is. Right, he just seems to be a ball of energy. Some may say he's God. Who knows? Again, this is a 1990s game. Don't think too much about it. But if they're able to defeat the Eternal Champion, then they can come back to life. Now, the storyline always said that they come back to life like a few seconds before they die, which to me, even as a little kid, never made real sense, because if they're coming back only a few seconds before they die, how do you prevent their death? They're probably in the process of dying, like, take again, Shadow being thrown off the building, right? If she's resurrected, like, 10 seconds before she hits the concrete, guess what? She's still going to hit the concrete and die. She can't save herself in 10 seconds. So I always found that weird. Maybe the person who wrote the script, who wrote the plot, didn't quite think about what that meant. But anyhow, I always found this storyline of, people coming from different times and different places, and, you know, being brought back to life, and how, had they lived, how they might have impacted history. Interesting. Right? Now, maybe it's just because it appeals to the history nerd in me, but I really liked that. So that was that. And plus, they had very interesting backgrounds. Like, he's a police officer from the future in Africa. She was a gymnast during the age of the Boxer Rebellion. And the way I know this is because of this. Yes, I was that nerd. I was that nerd that read the instruction manual, because that was the only way you found out about anything back in the day. The YouTube didn't exist. The internet was nowhere near as vast as it is today. So you found out what these characters were about by playing the game, or by reading the instruction manual, or both. So, you know, this page kind of, you know, gives you an idea of what the storyline is. Let's say here, like you know, for this reason, the contest must take place. Only one will remain. The victor will be returned to life a few seconds before death. How are you supposed to save yourself a few seconds before death? To avoid the past with the knowledge to change the future. So, like, how does that work? Even as a kid, I must have been like maybe 8 or 9 when I got this game. It's like, how in the world are you gonna do that? But again, you know, it's just one of those things you overlook. But it actually had, at least to me, a good story. A story that needed to be fleshed out and you know, worked out, of course. But, you know, I think it's a decent fundamentals and you know, potential that can be played with. So let me show you guys what some of these characters looked like, right? Especially for the character design. Since I've been talking so much about character designs, let me show you what some of these characters look like. 1 second. Here we go. Right, 1 second, sorry. Right, we have Blade, right? Your classic, you know, 1990s comic book hero, right? He's big, he's strong, he has a flat top haircut. Right, you have Blade, right? He's from, you know, the bounty hunter in 2030 AD, fighting style is Kempo, and he was born in Syria, raised in Africa. See, video games were much more progressive back in the day than they get credit for. Just saying. And then you had characters like Jetta. She was always the most tragic to me because, you know, see, she was 1899. Something that this game did, which both looking back on it, I'm very glad for, but also didn't make sense, is that it totally mixed up the times in the martial arts. Because it's like, how is a Russian circus acrobat, right? She's born in Russia. She's a cousin to the Tsar. But how is a Russian acrobat, even one with connections to the Russian royal family, right, going to learn savate, which is I think a French fighting style involving kicks, and pencak silat, right? So because of the fact that nobody really thought this out, this actually exposed me as a little kid to various types of martial arts. Because, you know, growing up watching TV, you know, I was familiar with at least the TV portrayals of, you know, kung fu and karate and, you know, ninjutsu and all that stuff, you know, being a big fan of like WMAC Masters. But, you know, this actually introduced me to styles I'd never heard of. It's like, what is savate or savate? I'd never heard of it. I don't think I would hear of it again until like the Nightwing comics, when it became the style Nightwing uses. But then there were other characters such as where's Shadow? I want to show you guys Shadow because she has a design that would so not work today. This is Larson, some of Larson's moves. That's Midnight. He was the vampire. I always felt bad for him. Look at this. Well, I guess he could have learned it in that time, right? G Kundo, but I don't think Bruce even formally came up with the style by 1967. But anyway, Midnight was always tragic to me because he was basically like this video game's version of like Mobius from what was it called? From the Spider-Man cartoon. Oh, here we go. Here's Shadow. Look at that. This look is not working. This look does not fly in today's world. Now Shadow was a corporate assassin from it's 1990. I don't think it's coming through clearly, but it's 1993. So at the time, present day, right? Her fighting styles are appropriately Japanese, right? Taijutsu and ninjutsu. So here's your standard sexy ninja girl. And she was a corporate assassin and whatnot. She's the one who got thrown off the building. Right, then we have Slash, right? His fight style is simply pain. Prehistoric hunter. We have Trident, right? We have a character from the time period of 110 BC, learning the Brazilian martial art of capoeira. It's one of those things you look back and it's, oh my god, nobody thought this out, did they? But I found this game fun. And I will always be happy that it exposed me to different martial arts styles at a young age. And in fact, I actually listed some of the martial arts styles, right? Capoeira, Hapkido, Jeet Kune Do, Kempo, Muay Thai, so on and so forth. So there's that. Now, I think that where this game kind of, at least for me, was a challenge was in its difficulty. This game was, at least for me, notoriously difficult. I don't think I ever beat the game, even once. I tried. There was a practice mode, but this game was just so difficult. And I wasn't terribly good at fighting games as a kid. But at least other games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, right, they were difficult, but they didn't feel prohibitively difficult. This type of game, at least for me, was what is called Nintendo hard. I only ever found out about the endings years later, you know, looking stuff up on YouTube. So what was interesting about the fatalities in this game, which you had regular fatalities and you had stage fatalities that were called Cinekills, was that they were a bit more cinematic than the fatalities in Mortal Kombat. There was also the fact that the fatalities were actually disturbing in a way where they were displayed. It was a different type of violence. Like, you know, classic MK had this, I would say, sort of morbid humor about the fatalities, which I think is inspired by its inspirations, right? Enter the Dragon, Little Trouble in Big China, things like that, especially for the first Mortal Kombat game. I mean, the first Mortal Kombat game is so 1970s kung fu flick, it almost hurts. But the fatalities, and especially the stage fatalities in this game, were just a different. It's one of those things where you just have to see it. Like I'll give a comparison. Like, you know, MK2, you would have fatalities like, you know, Raiden electrocutes somebody, or Liu turns into a dragon, or Johnny Cage, you know, hits an uppercut so hard that someone's head comes off. This game had fatalities like take Larson's stage fatality. It's a drive-by shooting, right? Of course, referencing the L.A. gangsters, and not L.A. Sorry, the Chicago gangsters of the 20s and 30s. But it's like you get shot down in a drive-by in front of a theater. Again, it was just a different presentation, which was both made it interesting and actually a bit hard for me to stomach. I mean, even seeing it later, you know, being older, and the graphics, you know, don't make my stomach churn anymore. It was still actually hard for me to watch some of the fatalities. It was just something different about it. I think it's one of those things where you just have to see it to really understand what I'm talking about. So this game, it got a sequel I think the sequel is called like Challenge from the Dark Side, where it introduced a Dark Eternal Champion. I can't speak on it as a player because I've never played that game, but from what I've seen, I mean, it was okay. I mean, the Challenge from the Dark Side had these advanced, 3D graphics for its day, right? So the best way I can describe the way it looked is that if you've ever seen the 3D cinematics from the first Tekken game, its visual design for the cinematics was like that, and it introduced new characters such as a pharaoh and a Chinese monk and a cowboy and a pirate, a female pirate, and different types of characters. From what I've seen, I actually think that Tales from the Dark Side is actually the worst of the two games, because it just didn't seem to have the same spirit, right? I don't think that the new characters, again, at least from what I've seen on YouTube, were as interesting. I'm not going to say developed, because the series never really lasted long enough to really develop any of the characters. But to me, the new characters just seemed less interesting. I mean, there was one, and it's obviously a joke character, but there's one character who's called the Senator. He's obviously a dig at Bill Clinton and at, 90s politicians in general. And he dies of a heart attack, and he's resurrected, and then he writes a book, and all this other stuff. I don't know. There was just something, I don't know. I guess there was just something silly to me about Challenge from the Dark Side that just didn't fit, because the whole thing was that Eternal Champions, although again, it's inherently silly in that, 1990s, edgy comic book way, but it took itself very seriously. Whereas Mortal Kombat, at least in the earlier games, was always kind of laughing at itself, right? It was always making fun of the fact of how ludicrous it was. Eternal Champions didn't do that. So then when you enter this joke character like the Senator, I don't know, it was just kind of sort of broke the theme, I guess. Again, not terrible, and again, I can't speak to it as a player, just as somebody who has seen the game, so it's more of a viewer, but I do, at least in my opinion, I think Tales from the Dark Side isn't really the true sequel that this game deserves, because it had a lot of potential. And part of me does want to see somebody who really likes the game, who really is creative and imaginative, right, and is not held down by today's standards, to bring this game back to life, bring it up to the modern day, and see if there is something here that really could be built upon and expounded upon. New characters, new moves, a difficulty level that is challenging but not prohibitively so. I do think, and I thought then and I think now, that this has a lot of potential. You just need the right people to unlock it. So anyway, this is my rambly, I wouldn't even call this a review, it's just memories, I would say, of a fighting game that, sort of, I don't know if it's to call it classic, but it's one of those games that, isn't really talked about. Right, again, it's not as good as Mortal Kombat, it's not as bad as Tattoo Assassins. It has potential. And it's quintessentially 1990s. I mean, seriously, look at Blade. Look at Blade here. You don't get much more 1990s than this guy. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I know that this is not much of a point here. It's not really a review or anything. But if you remember this game, if you ever played Challenge from the Dark Side, let me know. Please share your memories if you're willing to. Please let me know what you think. And have a good weekend. I'll see you around. Bye.